New Thought Media Network is excited to present Divine Science Everywhere, Fridays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Eastern. Come explore a modern experience of divine science. With Reverend Joy Fletcher, Reverend Jeff Radcliff, and Bishop Durrell Watkins. Join us as we open our eyes to divine science everywhere we look. Fridays on New Thought Media Network.
Hello, welcome to Divine Science Everywhere. We're so glad that you could join us today. I'm Reverend Joy Fletcher, and I'm one of the co-hosts here. Our other of the three, Bishop Durrell is not here, obviously, and so our process is going to be just a little bit different, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So, Reverend Jeff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Reverend Jeff. I am one of the co-hosts here, and I will be taking over for Bishop Durrell today. And I do need to make mention of our engineer today, Reverend Michael Mangus, who is my co-host on New Thought Media Network's Friday Fireside Chat. Our usual engineer, Bishop Robert, who was with us last week, was not able to be here as well. They had church business, so Michael's taking over for that. So shout out to Reverend Michael. You'll find me on Facebook at Giatti Ministries. Giatti stands for God is All There Is, Giati -Ministries on Facebook. So look for me there, as well as usually on Friday nights with Fireside Chat. Not tonight, though. We've got something else going on, so no Fireside Chat for tonight. And usually, Bishop Durrell is here to tell a little bit about himself and then introduce Reverend Joy and her centering moment. And we're looking forward to centering moment. Now, if you were with us last week, was a little interesting because I've been meditating for 40-something years. And every once in a while, I take a trip out of my body. And if you've never flown among the stars, if you've never had an out-of-body experience and gotten to go someplace other than where you are locally, I suggest that you learn to do that because it's really cool. It just kind of sort of happened last week, and I was out for a bit of Reverend Joy's centering moment, but when I came back, I was definitely centered. So we're gonna stay in the body this time and let Reverend Joy begin our show with her centering moment.
Thank you. So as we come together, we'll pause together and gently settle our body. Allow your shoulders to soften and allow your breath to arrive naturally with ease. If you notice yourself feeling stressed, take a moment to consciously watch your breath. Slowly and gently. So we turn our attention inward, not to escape the world, but rather to acknowledge the source from which we meet our physical life, the three-dimensional experience. Melinda Kramer wrote in Come Unto Me, the Christ, affirm that the spirit of wisdom and understanding the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge is ours, and that we all love to acknowledge it. The loving acknowledgement of truth makes us understand and to not judge, but rather see things with a spiritual observation. We speak the words of the Lord, which represents principle, and thus reprove with the demonstration of principle or truth. Those words written many decades ago are as ever true today as they were then. Truth is changeless. It's timeless. The principle remains. And as in divine science, we know that omnipresence, which is wisdom, light, love, hope, wisdom is ours. These are our spiritual gifts, and we are meant to share them with ourselves and with each other. The spirit of wisdom and understanding is ever present. It's never distant. The only distance that appears is in our own mind and in our own thoughts. And the same energy that created that sense of separation can be transformed into acceptance and a knowingness that it is here with us, as us, and operates through us. We offer the spirit of counsel and might, the courage to stand for what is right, the strength to act with integrity, and the steadiness to respond rather than react. In this moment, we release the habit of judgment by appearances alone, by headlines, by assumptions, by the quick conclusions that our senses report. Instead, let us choose instead to see with spiritual understanding. Justice as we know it in divine science is not punishment, but rather alignment. It is truth made visible, which is love in action. Love is not passive. It's the animating force that insists that every life matters, every voice has worth, and every soul is held in divine care and love. Wisdom guides our words, our decisions, and our willingness to listen deeply. Courage rises not as aggression, but as clarity. The courage to speak principle, to live it and demonstrate it through compassion, fairness, and peace. We hear The Christ invitation. Come unto me, all who are weary and heavy laden. This does not mean that we withdraw, but we are renewed. We lay down any fear and we rise up in truth and love and wisdom and unity. So let us from this moment, with new clarity and purpose and awareness and understanding, vow a vow to love more courageously, to demonstrate the principle of love and wisdom and justice. And we do this with humility and grace. For this moment is what we have been called to and for. And so it is. Amen.
Amen.
All right. This is the portion of our show where Bishop Durrell would be here with some of our New Thought luminaries. Since he's not, Reverend Joy and I are going to handle that together. And we've got just one. And what's interesting about this man is he's not technically New Thought, but with his teachings of oneness and diversity and inclusivity, we can pretty well claim him as ours. He was born Michael King, and his birthday was yesterday. And along the way, it's fascinating how he came to be known as we know him. He was born in 1929. He would have been 97 years old had he still been with us. He was born to Michael King Sr. Michael Jr.'s grandfather, maternal grandfather, was Adam Daniel Williams, who was a minister. And Pastor Adams and his wife Jenny moved to Atlanta in 1893, and he became the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church. Well, Michael Jr.'s father also became a minister, married Pastor Adams' daughter, Alberta, and he became assistant pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church under his father-in-law after he and Alberta got married. And when senior pastor passed away in 1931, Michael Sr. became the senior minister, and he and Alberta, as church first lady, grew the membership of the church from 600 to several thousand people. Now, this was the atmosphere that Michael Jr. grew up in. So in 1934, Pastor Michael Sr. was sent by the church on a multinational trip, and one of his stops was in Berlin for the 5th Congress of the Baptist World Alliance, the BWA. He also visited sites in Germany that were associated with the Reformation leader Martin Luther. And at that time, Nazism was on the rise in Germany, and the Congress of the BWA adopted in that Congress a resolution saying that they, and this is a quote, this Congress deplores and condemns as a violation of the law of God, the Heavenly Father, all racial animosity and every form of oppression or unfair discrimination toward the Jews, toward colored people, and toward subject races in any part of the world, end quote. And so when he got back home in August of 1934, Michael Sr. changed his name to Martin Luther King Sr. And at the same time, changed his 5-year-old son's name to Martin Luther King Jr. And that's who we're talking about today. At age 25, in 1954, Martin Jr. Was called as pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and he later became co-pastor with his father of Ebenezer Baptist Church. This was in 1960, and he served there until his assassination in 1968. And so now you know the rest of the story about how Martin Luther King started out as Michael and became one of our New Thought luminaries with his activism and with his eye toward diversity and inclusion.
Thank you. I loved hearing all of that. It was fascinating, and he was so instrumental. Spoke out about justice and love and dignity. Everyone deserved that, and
Yeah.
I just respect that so much. And of course, we know of his speech, "I Have a Dream," and until recently, AGNT had a special event from January 30th through April 4th, and they began with the death anniversary of Martin Luther King and ended with the anniversary of the death of Gandhi. And so that whole time, that 64 days, it was called Season for Nonviolence. They had special events and different things to honor not only these two individuals, but for what they stood for. So there are prayer groups and other events. And then last year, New Thought Media Network, or was it? Well, we recorded a devotional each day on that in that period, that season, and they were sent out daily to different people that had subscribed, and it was very, very nice. So,
and a couple of other things that we need to say about Martin Luther King Jr. is that he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. He was also posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977, and he was also awarded also posthumously the Congressional Gold Medal, and that was in 2004. So our luminary for today, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King.
And thank you, Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now we're going to take just a quick break, and when we come back, we have got a fascinating guest. You're going to love Reverend Nancy Stokes. So I'm looking forward to reading her bio to you and getting to know her. So we'll take just a quick break, and as Reverend Michael would say in Friday Fireside Chat, we'll be right back. This is Divine Science Everywhere on your, and I mean your, New Thought Media Network.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you. New Thought Media Network proudly presents A Science of Mind Saturday Conversations. Learn more about the Science of Mind philosophy, faith, and way of life. Join our team of experts for a weekly deep dive discussion. Come study the science of mind, chapter by chapter, and resources from the Science of Mind archives. Plan to join us every Saturday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Only on the New Thought Media Network.
New Thought Media Network is excited to present Divine Science Everywhere, Fridays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Eastern. Come explore a modern experience of divine science. With Reverend Joy Fletcher, Reverend Jeff Radcliff, and Bishop Durrell Watkins. Join us as we open our eyes to divine science everywhere we look. Fridays on New Thought Media Network.
Welcome back.
Yeah, this is exciting, don't you think?
Yes.
Okay, Reverend Nancy Stokes, I get to introduce her. And this is really cool because I've been waiting to talk to you one-on-one about this.
Okay.
Your first career was that as a professional puppeteer, which is pretty cool. You worked for an internationally known puppeteer in the Washington, D.C. area before you created your own touring company when you moved to Florida. And that's where you found New Thought. So that's where we're going to start here in just a minute. It happened, though, you say, because somebody said, it's not that I'm here and God's over there. It's that we're here and God is here. And you were like, I got to learn more. Tell me more. So you have been a New Thought student for about 30 years. And before that, you were raised Catholic. And then you lived in an Eastern ashram for a few years. But you moved back to Virginia and studied at the Divine Science School in Washington, D.C., ordained at the Valley Community Church, Divine Science in Roanoke, Virginia. So you are a New Thought teacher, practitioner, minister, puppeteer. I don't know where to start with you. You have so much going on. But the puppet thing, that's how Jim and Tammy Baker started out.
Oh.
When they got married and went into ministry, they started out at the 700 Club, which is just not all that far from Roanoke in Virginia Beach. And they did a kid show with puppets. So, but let's get started at the beginning of your New Thought. First, how was it a Divine Science church that you found originally? Was it
No, that was at the end of the journey 15 years ago. So I actually have to start way back when I was a child.
Okay.
Being raised Catholic, because it's a real progression, because I went through lots of different thought processes about, who I am, what is God, who is there, what is that?
Right.
Because I went to Catholic school, and I was a questioner, and they didn't like that. So I got black spiders on my chart. The one in the back of the room and the bulletin board, everybody's got a chart. Well, I had lots of spiders on my chart because, for instance, things like, okay, we're talking about Adam and Eve, and they have Cain and Abel, they get kicked out of the garden, and there's Cain and Abel, and they got married. My hand shoots up. Well, if Adam and Eve were the only people on earth, where did their wives come from? So the nun comes down the aisle, looks at me, hangs over me, and goes, they don't tell us that. And I said, well, who are they? And why don't they tell us that? She didn't like that. So that was sort of the story of my life, because I always wanted to know why, because some things didn't make sense. Even as a child, the idea of you die at the end of your life and there's either heaven or hell waiting. And it's like, what? That didn't make any sense to me, even as a child. And then the whole thing about this character with like horns and a pitchfork and bright red and hell, all that stuff is like, I just don't think I ever believed that. It just seemed just too weird and too far out. So it sort of started there with me thinking like, there's got to be more than this. I remember thinking, even as a teenager, there's got to be more than this, meaning all of the outside, everything that we see, the appearance. And after college, I pretty much quit practicing or even believing, like being in Catholic. It just sort of went away. I wasn't at home. I didn't have to go to mass with my mom anymore. So it really kind of started there with me asking the questions. What is this? What's real? What are we doing here? So it kind of started there. And then I ended up, my degree is in theater arts. And I did much to the chagrin of my parents. They couldn't believe it. I mean, why couldn't you done poli-sci or biology or something useful, right? But I really came to it naturally. I actually did a big last whole semester program that I invented myself, puppetry. Because in puppetry, you get to do everything, all the marketing and the creating and the directing and everything. And I built all my puppets and everything. So I did that. So I went to Key West after school, after college. I ended up down there, and I had a shop in the torpedo factory, which was actually a torpedo factory in World War II. So it was a big building, and there were all these different artists in there. And so I had a really going business and everything. And then eventually it got so hot, I couldn't stand it anymore because, Key West is very hot most of the time, but really bad starting in April, back in the 70s anyway. And so I moved back to this way. I moved back towards Roanoke, but I ended up in Georgetown. And I worked for a famous puppeteer there, whose name was the Bob Brown Marionettes. And so we did a lot of traveling. Anyway, I learned a lot about how to create puppets and shows. And so I performed Peter and the Wolf with a full orchestra in the pit at the Detroit Museum of Art. And we traveled all over the place. We performed at the White House on the lawn. So that was quite interesting. And so I really, did a lot of interesting, fun things with puppets when I worked for Bob. But in the meantime, while I was living in Georgetown, I went into a gallery, an art gallery that had beautiful, wonderful pictures in it. And it happened to be of a young man and woman that I had met in Key West. And they said, "Oh, if you're ever in DC, come to our shop." So I did. And so they invited me to go to a really great vegetarian feast. And lo and behold, it was at the local Hare Krishna temple in Potomac, Maryland. So I went there and instantly was totally attracted to the color and the smell of the incense. And the women were all wearing beautiful saris, and they were all my age. I mean, everybody was in their early 20s. I was like 22 and 23. And so it was very attractive. And I started learning about transmigration of the soul, which made way more sense to me than when you die, you're dead, or there's only heaven or hell waiting for you at the end. So that made more sense to me. And also they use the phrase, they don't say die, they say you leave your body. So-and-so left their body. And I thought, oh, that makes so much more sense to me, because that's what we do. We actually leave our body behind and we go get a new one somewhere else in a new expression of life. Although I didn't know that's what I would call it eventually. And I learned, the Bhagavad Gita, and I learned how to read Sanskrit. And so it was very interesting. And at the time, when I was there, it made more sense to me than the Christianity that I had grown up with as being Catholic. Which of course, when I was growing up Catholic, my Presbyterian friend said I was a Catholic. I was not a Christian. She said, "No, you're not a Christian. You're a Catholic." And I went, "Okay." So I do have to tell you a funny story, though. So when Susan and I were 6 years old, we were going to prove to the world. I said I was going to prove to the world that Jesus was Catholic, and Susan was going to prove to the world that Jesus was a Presbyterian. So we go lay down in Churchill Court, about the distance apart that wheels would be on a car. And so we're lying there on the road and we're just waiting for a car to come run us both over.
Oh my.
Okay, so now little Tommy, Susan's brother, comes flying out of the house. He's like 3 years younger than we are, and he is freaking out and starts screaming and crying. And so their housekeeper comes flying out and drags us up off the road. But we were so mad, of course, because we wanted to prove once and for all. When I was 35 years old, sitting in a Unitarian church, a Catholic friend of mine said something, and she said, "Oh, honey, no, Jesus wasn't Catholic. He was a Jew." I almost fell out of my chair, dying, and she fell out of her chair laughing. She couldn't believe it. I said, "But in the Catholic prayer, it says that Jesus Christ came to this earth to establish the Catholic Church." I said it every time. And so that's what we were taught, is that Jesus came to establish the Catholic Church. And I'm like, Jesus was Jewish? Really? I was 35 years old when I figured that out. That just seems so appalling and amazing to me that I never understood that Jesus was Jewish. And so that was a real revelation. And so I've really enjoyed I lived on a 600-acre farm as a Hare Krishna person, devotee. And so I learned how to work. I worked a 5-acre garden that fed everybody twice a day with oxen. And I taught in a one-room schoolhouse that had 5 grades in it for a while. And I also cooked. So for 100 people twice a day. So I did all of that within all the time that I lived in the ashram there, which was quite a while. And so I had lots of chances. And of course, we did mantra chanting. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hare Krishna movement or not, but we did mantra chanting on beads. And that was the meditation. And I was there for quite a while. But then at some point, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't feeding me enough. And it just wasn't satisfied. So we ended up in Florida, and 'cause I was married at the time. And so I met a woman at the library. And of course, we know that there's no such thing as chance, right? Mm-hmm. So because I'm still looking, okay, I'm done with that. I'm going, okay, well, I'm not going to do that now. And I'm in the search mode here. And so I end up meeting this woman, the Reverend Marty Dow, at one of the libraries in Gainesville, Florida. And we just really liked each other. And so, I started spending time with her. And then I started to work for her husband, Jeff, who was an educator. So I was doing some typing and stuff for him. So I'd go over to her house and everything. And so she didn't tell me she was a New Thought minister. I didn't even know what that was. And so, but instead of like zoning in on me and just trying to turn me into a New Thought person, one day she says, "I have an assignment for you." I go, oh, what's that? She said, "I want you to, for the next 7 days, I want you to write down every negative thought." I said, "Oh, well, what do you mean?" And she goes, "Well, we've been friends for a little while now, and I need you to become more conscious." And I said, "What do you mean? I don't understand." She goes, "Just, I want you to write it all down." I said, "Well, okay, I can carry a little notebook around with me." She goes, "No, you need one of these."
Oh my.
She goes, no, a little notebook will do you no good. I want you to get a full-fledged, what are these called?
Legal pad.
Legal pad. There you go. A legal pad. She goes, "No, you need a legal pad." And I said, "Okay, harsh." Well, a week later, I came back to her with pages and pages of stuff. Because I really wanted to do it right. Because she said, I just want you to concentrate on whenever you have a negative thought, I want you to be conscious of it and just jot it down. So that's what I did. So the very first thing she taught me was, think about what you want, not about what you don't want. Which to me really is kind of like the very sort of introduction to affirmative prayer.
Sure.
Because I learned, of course, as you know, being raised Catholic, that it was always the pleading and the begging. I promise you, God, I'll do this if you do this for me. Cajoling, all of that kind of stuff. So this was sort of new for me that I would affirm what I want to see happen at that meeting, or when I go do that, or when I have to go find something. I affirm that I find it. And so, but she didn't really talk to me about my relationship with God in the beginning at all. She just sort of taught me these sort of more subtle things about New Thought that actually blossom into a much bigger recommendation of like what I could do or how I could change my consciousness. I mean, I had never even really heard so much the word consciousness so much before that. So I wasn't quite sure what it even really meant. But so she started off with that. And then about 2 months later, we're driving down to Miami and we're talking about spiritual topics, which we always did. And I was learning so much from her. And I said something about, it's just too bad God's way over there in heaven. Which at that point, I wasn't even calling it heaven because I had just been living in the ashram. And then she said, she said, most traditional religions, they say, I'm here and God's over there. And I went, yeah, I'm here and God's somewhere else in heaven. And she said, but you know what it really is? I said, oh, Marty, tell me what? I want to know. She goes, I am here and God is here. It is a good thing I was not driving. I burst into tears and I was like, what a revelation. It was like I couldn't believe it. It's all just right here. And so that was another just like huge revelation to me that really got me really hooked on New Thought stuff. And so I ended up finding that there was a Unity Church in Gainesville. And I started going there, and I was very active and everything. And but then I discovered Ernest Holmes. Oh, sorry. Then I discovered Ernest Holmes, and why is that making that noise? I'm so sorry. And it was like, oh, this is also interesting. So I started reading a lot of Ernest Holmes' work, The Science of Mind, and then I discovered that there was a Science of Mind church in Ocala. So I would go down there also. And so I was really sort of, being in both of those places. And it was so enlivening and just so eye-opening, right? Just so different than what I had grown up with. And also even, doing the whole Eastern path, it appeared to me that it was like, wow, this is really cool. So then I ended up moving back to Roanoke, and I was in Roanoke for 5 years before I found the Divine Science Church. 5 years, I just didn't know that divine science was, because I never really heard of divine science so much. And then I was like, whoa, wait, what is this? And so I started going. And then, of course, there was Dr. Marita Wiggins and Velma Bullington were there, Reverend Velma Bullington. And I started taking classes right away. And for me, there was it was like this little piece that I didn't realize was missing. And it was so, but between unity and religious science and divine science, it like, for me, it was like a whole understanding, but much better. And so as I was taking my classes, I just decided to go ahead and finish. I wasn't looking to become a minister because I wanted a church. I honestly did not. For me, it was very personal. So that's how I came. And the talking about the presence and omnipresence was, even though we know omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, I heard that at the Catholic Church, but nobody zeroed in on omnipresence as Nona Brooks said, the omnipresence is all of divine science. That's what it's like, because it was so enlivening, and it was so life-changing for me, actually. So that's, I kind of went a circuitous route. Did not start off in divine science at all, but that's where I ended up.
I have so many questions. I have a list of questions.
You're kidding.
Starting with, did you ever use your puppets as part of your ministry?
You mean as a divine science minister?
Yeah.
No, actually, but I actually did something 2 weeks ago at Unity here. So I go to the Unity Church here in Lynchburg because there is no other New Thought anything here. So so I actually did I did a thing for Christmas. I was actually not the speaker particularly, but I took up like 10 minutes of the speaker time. And so I was with Cindy Possum, and we did a very cute thing in which I could, throw the philosophy in while we were talking. But no, I actually really haven't. Well, because at the Divine Science Church in Roanoke, by the time I got there were hardly any children. There was no children 15 years ago. A couple of young ones, but they didn't come all the time. And I used to do the children's church stuff sometimes at the beginning of the service. But no, I did not. Just didn't seem to come up, or nobody seemed to like want me to do that or anything. So I just never did.
Oh, okay. And you sparked something with me. I live in Tennessee, but I'm originally from West Virginia. And when I heard about your participation with the Hare Krishna movement for a while, it reminded me of New Vrindavan.
Oh yes.
So have you been there?
Oh no.
Okay.
No.
I have not been either. It started back in the late '60s.
Yeah.
When he moved, into West Virginia. I wanted to go so bad. This was like early mid '70s when I was like, coming up. And my grandmother every summer would take us on little trips around the state. We'd visit different things. And the one year I brought up going to Moundsville to see the Palace of Gold, my grandmother put her foot down. She said, no. This was about the same time everybody was all up in arms over cults and, the Moonies and all this. And she had heard bad things about the Hare Krishnas, and she was afraid to go there because she didn't want to end up being kidnapped by a cult. And I'm like, are you serious?
That doesn't happen.
So I just wondered if you had gotten to see it, because I never did, and I'm from there.
No, I lived in the ashram in Potomac, Maryland, and then when I was married, my husband and we moved to Gitanagari, which was that farm in Pennsylvania. But I can understand why she would say that, because there's a lot of bad publicity and bad press.
Yeah.
Specifically about the New Vrindavan. So, but I did not personally experience anything, and I promise you, I was not kidnapped. When I moved into the ashram, I was not kidnapped. I quit my job and moved in. So.
And what did you learn from that while you were there?
I'm sorry.
What did you learn from being at the ashram about yourself and your spirituality?
Well, like I said, I was attracted to the philosophy in terms of transmigration of the soul, which was completely, and karma, that whole idea, which of course in Christianity is really reaping and sowing. Mm-hmm. But I hadn't been around anything Catholic for quite a number of years. Well, I don't know, 3 or 4 years before I had gone in. So it was interesting because, the women all lived together and the men all lived together, and the people who were married lived in separate little places. And so, it was interesting living with a bunch of girls. It was very austere, not quite as austere as New Vrindavan, though, I hear. So it was very simple. It was like it was very monk-like for all of us. And so I learned to live without much. We had plenty of things to eat, a good place to stay. We had classes. There was a beautiful temple room. It was a different concept because the Hare Krishna philosophy, the Vaishnava philosophy, actually has to do with worshiping the Murti of Krishna and all the different parts of that whole philosophy. And so it was completely different. And I enjoyed being with a lot of people my age. It was like a family. So for a long time it worked, and it was very good. I liked chanting, mantra chanting. It was because you're using more of your senses than if you're just praying, because you've got beads in your hands and you're touching the beads and you're moving the beads and you're saying words. So it's a meditation that involves several senses. So it keeps you occupied as opposed to just trying to sit down and meditate and just be there, So that was easier for me than trying to, sit on the floor and concentrate, or not concentrate, actually. So that was very good for me, because I was in my early 20s. And so that was something very new for me. And I actually really loved, the thing I loved the most out of all the different services I did at the temple was plowing with oxen. We also got the wood out of the forest, because it was 600 acres. So we would take the oxen into the forest, and they would cut the wood on a wheel. And the oxen were just, they're wonderful. If they could bottle the smell of silage, I would buy it. Crazy, I know, but I loved the barn. I loved the smell of the cows. And actually, when we left, that was the part that I missed the most, was working with animals. It was just fantastic. It really was. So,
Thank you.
And I grew up in farm country. I grew up in farm country, and then when I was in college in West Virginia, at West Virginia University, I lived in an old farmhouse. They changed into three little apartments. And I lived in the basement, but we were right next to the WVU dairy farm. And I'd have people come to visit, and they'd say, "Oh my God, it stinks out here." And I'm like, "It smells like the earth."
It's earthy. Very earthy.
So it's interesting. It was interesting to me that the city kids who would come visit the country boy who was used to all that. It was really cool. So I get that with bottle the smell. I would buy it.
Yeah, it was, and I had not experienced that in life ever. I was an Army brat. So, I went to 4 different high schools and, traveled all over the place with my parents. And we never lived on a farm anywhere. So I loved that experience. I relished that experience. But it was not meant to be in terms of like anything permanent. And but I guess the things that I learned within New Thought, I think it wasn't until I moved back to Roanoke and was going to the Divine Science Church and very active there over the last 16 years, that I really started to get it a little bit. It's like, because, when you're young, life is happening, you're having kids and, all this kind of stuff. And you're still trying to focus in on your spiritual life. Then, I remember Dr. Marita telling me that her only quiet time was when she was in the bathroom. Because she had 4 kids, that was the only quiet time she had. So, at least I didn't have to deal with 4 children. I just had 1. But it wasn't until I really started going to the Divine Science. Also, I was older. So, and I think that there are a lot of people who just love learning. Even as we get older, it's the thing that really keeps us going. And so I think that I really dove into that. No kids at home or anything, and I could really focus on that. So I paid way more attention to Divine Science, and I also got cancer. And if it had not been for my Divine Science studies and understanding that I was really practicing seriously, I would be dead today, actually.
You have been one of our most fascinating guests.
Oh,
there's so much that you have done and so much that you could offer the rest of us. I hope at some point in time you can come back to see us again. That would be awesome.
Well, sure. I think I probably shared just about everything that you did not need to know. But I will say that I watched Reverend Linda Martella Whitsett, your friend, Jeff.
Right.
And she was, and I would have to say that my leukemia journey was all about unforgiveness, and the place that I found that was in Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. And I know, you all talked about how, well, might be you, might not mean your bones are doing this or that. But for me, she was spot on. I opened the book. I said, okay, I'm going to open this book and I'm going to find exactly what I need to do, because I want to know why this has happened to me. Why do I have this leukemia with all these, excuse me, with all of these anomalies happening?
Mm.
And it was about unforgiveness.
Mm.
And it was, I spent months doing forgiveness work. And then one day I woke up and I said, it is done.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful, and that's a wonderful thing for us to segue into.
Yeah. So that's what we can talk about next time.
Yes.
Oh, well, that was a definite
journey.
journey, I'll tell you. It really was.
But thank you again for being here with us. We're going to take a real quick break, and then we'll come back to wrap it up. Divine Science Everywhere on New Thought Media Network.
Well, welcome back, and thank you again, Nancy. We really appreciate that you shared your space with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And be sure to come back next week. Reverend Marilyn Hoyt is our guest. Pardon me?
Maureen.
Okay, Maureen. Dr. Maureen Hoyt. And then the following week is Kathy Wilson, who is an animal chaplain, and that should be fascinating. And we are just booking guests right and left. We're just so excited and delighted that everyone is sharing their space with us. So thank you very, very much. And just remember that this is Divine Science Everywhere on New Thought Media Network.
New Thought Media Network is excited to present Divine Science Everywhere, Fridays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Eastern. Come explore a modern experience of divine science. With Reverend Joy Fletcher, Reverend Jeff Radcliff, and Bishop Durrell Watkins. Join us as we open our eyes to divine science everywhere we look. Fridays on New Thought Media Network.